always looking.
Ain't nobody bad like you. Can't stop this, you can't stop this. Ain't nobody bad like ain't nobody bad like the Meteor Man.
Robert Townsend, the Meteor Man, rated PG, starts Friday, August 6th at theaters everywhere.
Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1993 comic book comedy, The Meteor Man. Now, this is a movie that I remember watching quite a bit when I was a kid. I used to check it out when it was on TV, whenever it was on, and I used to rent it on VHS, and I was worried that this was going to be one of those movies that would not hold up after all these years. And I honestly am glad to sit here and say that is not the case. In fact, I think this film holds up even better as an adult than it did when I was a kid. I really did enjoy The Meteor Man. I thought this was a really fun movie. It was right up my alley. I definitely agree with the Hollywood Reporter when they say it's terrifically entertaining. That's the perfect way to describe the film. Does it have flaws? Absolutely. It's not perfect. It has some issues, and I'll get to those soon enough. But overall, I felt The Meteor Man was a really fun time at the movies. And I forgot how entertaining this movie was. And I definitely can say that this is a movie that deserves its cult following and then some. And I honestly think this is a gem. I think this is a nice hidden gem that I think more people should check out. Not only for its status as being one of, if not the first black superhero film to hit the movie screens with a cast that's a cast that is majorly black, but it's also a film that it's really fun and entertaining and clever in its own right. It's got some really cool ideas and nice concepts. It's got good performances by the cast. It's got style for days. It's honestly it's one of those films that I really do wonder why this has been so forgotten about by a lot of people. Why this is a movie that a lot of people don't talk about, or if they do talk about it, or they do review it, it's ironically like, oh, it's cheesy, oh, it's it's good, but because of how bad it is. And I'm like, this film has its tongue planted firmly in its left cheek throughout the majority of the running time. I don't understand the whole ironically enjoying The Meteor Man. This isn't The Room. This isn't one of those movies. It's not Superman 4. I don't understand that. It knows what it is. It is pure camp. And that's one of the big reasons why I like it. It feels like a throwback to the Richard Donner and Richard Lester Superman films with Christopher Reeve. And I think I remember reading somewhere that Townsend was inspired by the Superman movies for his approach for The Meteor Man. Now, The Meteor Man is a labor of love for Robert Townsend. He wrote, directed, and starred in this movie. That's something that should be commended. Yes, the film didn't do that well in the box office. It cost $30 million to make, and this is one of those movies where it definitely does look like it. I was really surprised by how great the effects held up for the most part after all these years. And then when I saw that ILM worked on the movie and did the visual effects, then I was not so surprised, because it's Industrial Light and Magic. They were, they're the top of the effects mountain, and they were back then, and they were always on the cutting edge, and The Meteor Man is no exception with some of the effects. And I'll get to more of those effects later, and actually in more detail near the end of this review, because I did some research for this review, folks. I got some nice juicy bits of trivia for you that I'm going to save for the end, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, yeah, I thought the effects looked great, and it's a movie that, yeah, it's not only should be remembered for what it did for black superheroes on cinema screens, but also for just for how solid and entertaining and fun of a movie that it is. I mean, movies, for the most part, in my opinion, one of the biggest goals, one of the biggest things about films is they're meant to be entertaining. And I felt 100% that the Meteor Man succeeded in that. It's not boring. It's not a snooze fest. And it's not one of those films that's pretentious or anything. It's got a good message to it, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. So, yeah, I do feel it succeeds as a film as well. Not only when it comes to its message and to what it did for African Americans in terms of having them represented on cinema as heroes, but also for the overall film itself. But anyway, The Meteor Man is, like I said, it's written, directed, and starring Robert Townsend. He before this, he did Hollywood Shuffle and a few other things. This film sadly killed his film career. This is a big bomb in the box office, and yeah, it did not do anything to help him in terms of his cinematic career. In fact, he didn't do that much when it comes to acting and movies after this. He did get a pretty successful sitcom on the WB called The Parenthood after this, but yeah, this was a pretty big high-profile bomb, and sadly, Robert Townsend never really got a fair shake, in my opinion, in Hollywood. He really was and still is an immensely talented actor, an immensely talented comedian, and he's highly regarded and well respected by a lot of people in Hollywood and anyone who's known him. And it's one of those movies that, yeah, it didn't do well, and it did not help him elevate his status as a Hollywood actor. But it's still a movie that you could tell he had a passion behind it. You could tell he wanted to do it, and he put his best foot forward with this film. He took that risk. He said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a black superhero movie made, and I'm going to get it into theaters, and if it's successful, so be it. If it's not successful financially, that's not the main goal. And I don't think that was the main goal for him. He wanted to and he even said that he wanted to have a film that black youth, that black kids could look up to, and black kids could be like, hey, and not only just black kids, but, you know, kids of all ages, that they could look up to a black superhero and have a black equivalent to Superman. And I do feel he succeeded, especially with the personality and the persona of this character, of the Meteor Man, and Jefferson Reed, who is the Clark Kent to the Meteor Man's Superman. So, even though this wasn't successful financially, I do feel it succeeded in really starting that movement, starting the movement of black superheroes on film. Now, the film has a really talented cast. Not only do you have Robert Townsend, who's shuffling all these different abilities and doing all these different things with the production, but you have Marla Gibbs, who plays Jefferson's mother, because Robert Townsend plays Jefferson Reed / the Meteor Man. Eddie Griffin, in an early role, plays Jefferson's friend Michael. Robert Gulluiame plays Ted Reed, Jefferson's dad. James Earl Jones has a fun role as Ernest Moses, Jefferson's neighbor. Bill Cosby, Bill Cosby's in this as a vagrant named Marvin, who has a key part and a key role near the climax, or during the climax of the film. But keep in mind, it's easy to look at this in hindsight and be like, what were they doing? But Bill Cosby, nobody knew at all what kind of person he was or the kind of stuff that he was doing. So I can't really get that upset. It's one of those things where Bill Cosby being in the film makes it kind of awkward. Makes it kind of an awkward watch. But I can't really hold that against the movie. You have another bad creation who play the Junior Lords, the children members of the Golden Lords. So another bad creation was I think there were a bunch of kids who did hip-hop or R&B back in the 90s. You have Roy Fegan, who plays Simon Kane. Well, I honestly really liked his performance. Yeah, he overdid it a bit near the end when he got the meteor powers, and he's like, "I am unstoppable," or whatever. But I'd rather an actor ham it up than not put any effort into it. Really, to be honest, I'll take the hammy acting over somebody who's just extremely subdued and doesn't give a shit. Um, you also had Frank Gorshin, the Riddler from the '60s Batman series. He plays Anthony Byers, the drug lord, who's the guy who's behind all of this whole. He's the big leader who leads all these other uh, drug deals and these gangs and stuff like that. And he was pretty funny in this. He was really over the top, but he definitely made an impression. Luther Vandross is also in this as one of the gang members. Jameson, Sinbad has a bit role as Stacy's boyfriend. Stacy is played by, I don't, did she even listed on these? It doesn't even seem like it's even showing her here on the Wikipedia. Yeah, because Stacy's a character that was like there and then kind of dropped, and I'll talk about her later. But yeah, Sinbad's in it in a little bit role. A little bit goes a long way with Sinbad. You also have Naughy By Nature, who plays. They play the Bloods, and you have Cypress Hill, who play the Crips, which is really crazy. Like, it's the Bloods and the Crips, and they're played by Naughy By Nature and Cypress Hill. Big Daddy Kane plays a member of the Golden Lords named Pirate. You also have Don Cheadle in an early role plays Goldilocks, who's another member of the Golden Lords. And Tiny Lister plays Digit, who's like this big guy who works for the Lords. And there's this repeating joke where he ends up breaking multiple parts of his body trying to fight the Meteor Man. And you even have Wallace Shawn, who plays one of the teachers. Faison Love, it has an early role as Maurice. And you even have someone like Biz Marquis, who plays himself. So, yeah, and then you have John Witherspoon, who you'd see in the Friday films. Like, he plays Clarence James Carter III. I believe he was in the Friday movies. Yeah. So it has a really talented cast. A bunch of eclectic, really talented actors and actresses. And, of course, the script was written by Robert Townsend. There's a lot of clever stuff in this. I really like the idea that Meteor Man, one of his powers, is that he can grab a book or a magazine and he can absorb all the information in it and know everything, but only for 30 seconds. I like that. I think that's pretty funny. That leads to some fun gags, especially in the climax. And I always crack up thinking about this scene when Simon Kane and the Meteor Man and Jefferson Reed, they both absorb the knowledge out of a runway modeling how-to book, and so they start like doing this runway model sort of walk off, and then they get in a fight with each other. It's funny, and I thought both actors really did a great job with the comedic timing and the acting in that particular sequence. He also seems to always kind of see in X-ray vision, so he constantly sees people in their underwear. I like that he's afraid of heights, so when he learns how to fly, when he just flies low to the ground. So I think that's funny. I like the fact that Meteor Man is a hero who's flawed. He's afraid of heights. He was leery about doing this from the beginning, but ultimately he decides to use his powers for good. I like that. It makes him a more interesting character because he's not perfect. He isn't. He's the opposite of perfect. He's a guy who really, isn't the greatest hero because he doesn't really know how to do everything yet, and he's still trying to figure things out. And he has his own neuroses and his own fears and things like that. He also can talk to his dog. Like, he can actually speak to his dog, and then his dog can actually understand what his dog is saying to him. So there was some fun stuff with that as well. Yeah, he has like super breath. He's got laser eyes. He's got super speed. There's a really cool scene near the end when the Meteor Man uses his powers and uses super speed to rapidly beat up the villain Simon Kane and then wrap him up in a rope and tie him up and get ready to send him to jail. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff with Meteor Man's powers. When it comes to the script, the weakest parts, it seems like there's a lot of storylines and subplots that are brought up and then dropped. Like the stuff with the love interest, it's brought up and then they never really go anywhere with it, which makes me think, why was that even there? The climax feels, the ending really does feel rushed. It just feels like the movie just stops. And honestly, the ending where the Crips and the Bloods team up to stop the bad guys is more fantasy than a meteor giving a substitute teacher superpowers or a gang leader getting powers from the meteor. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like the superpowers and the meteor. That's less. That's the stuff from reality compared to the fantasy of the Crips and the Bloods getting along. But it's a nice message though. It just the film just freeze frames on the Meteor Man just looking up in the air and smiling, and then it's like there had to be something more here. It really does seem like this is a movie where MGM got a hold of the script and was like, no, it needs to have more. We need to have more to it. Like, Meteor Man needs to be doing superhero stuff. He needs to be hip. He needs to be cooler. Can't just have Jefferson Reed fight the bad guy himself and then the neighborhood team up and get rid of the gangs. No, I mean, it's called the Meteor Man. It's a black superhero. We need superhero stuff. And so that's why you get the ending that you get, which is a hodgepodge of different things and just feels rushed. Although, I mean, there's still some cool stuff about it. I like like I said, I like the runway model dance off. I like the scene where Meteor Man uses his superpowers to dispatch Simon Kane. But yeah, it feels like a different movie as soon as Bill Cosby's character shows up and pulls the guns out of the Lord's hands and turns the tables. So, yeah, another thing about the script I felt could have been a little bit better. I really felt that they could have shown more scenes of the Meteor Man doing more things. Like when he first has his powers, there's a little bit of a montage of some stuff that he does. Like he blows away all the cocaine in this drug dealing in this crack house, and then he goes in and stops the cops and the Crips and the Bloods from shooting each other. And there's a fun scene where he's standing there while they're shooting him, and he's yawning. He's like, and they're just like shrugging his shoulders. He's like, come on, why are you shooting me? I'm bulletproof. This is a waste of time. I got a kick out of that. But I mean, yeah, and then they had that like one scene where Eddie Griffin steals his suit and tries to masquerades as the Meteor Man so he can, I guess, potentially get a date with one of the beautiful news anchor that he has a crush on. But it's like, yeah, okay, that's an alright scene, but it's like, I would have rather have had just more scenes of the Meteor Man, Robert Townsend as the Meteor Man, doing more things, like stopping more criminals, doing more stuff. So that would have been nice to see. But, yeah, I mean, and I also want to mention stuff that's nice to see that was in the movie was the sequence where he ends up creating this giant massive garden in one of the projects, and he cleans up the junk out of this place where there's this park and it's all worn down and abandoned, and he cleans up the junk and he ends up using his powers to create this giant garden with all these giant vegetables and stuff that can help feed the poor. And I really like that. I thought that was a really nice touch, and it really did show you how different of a hero Meteor Man is. He's definitely a hero who's less about violence, solving problems and more about trying to figure out a different way to do it, which ties into his character, who he's a substitute teacher, and he's trying to do the he's trying to really help the youth and get them to stay on the right path, and so on. Now, other than those things that I mentioned, I definitely think the script, though, is still really solid. It's solid as a rock, solid as a meteor, and it does a good job with its characters, especially Jefferson Reed. I think he's a very inspiring character. He starts out kind of a wimp, not wanting to fight back, not wanting to do anything about what's going on in his community, not wanting to fight the Golden Lords. But then when he gets the superpowers, he's reluctant to use them, but once he starts using them to help better the community, he realizes a lot of stuff about himself. And even when he loses those powers, he's still willing to fight for what's right. And he's willing to die for that. And he actually goes out and gets in a fight with Simon Kane and gets a busted up eye and gets his ass handed to him. And he's pretty close to death until he gets saved and he's able to get energy back from the meteor. But I felt like that was I really liked that part of the script from Robert Townsend. I thought that really made that character stand out in a really good way. And yeah, he's just a normal guy. He's a substitute teacher. I mean, it's everybody has like everybody has a teacher, you know. To imagine that your teacher is a hero. I mean, that's pretty cool, actually. I mean, a lot of superheroes, they're not teachers. They're not substitute teachers. So I like that. I like that part of his character. And I like how he evolves as a character. But going back to other things that I thought were worth noting about the film, definitely 100% the score by Cliff Eidelmann. This score is amazing. I love this score. It fits the film like a glove, it's heroic, it's adventurous, and it's unbelievably overlooked and underrated, just like the film itself. And it's really too bad that Cliff Eidelmann never really did anything else like this score after this movie. He did the score for Free Willy 3. After this, he couldn't get a job the caliber of the Meteor Man, and that sucks, because this score is one of the best heroic scores I've honestly heard. It's right up there with Superman and Batman and all of that. It really is. It's that good of a score. So that's definitely something about this that really soars. The cinematography by John A. Alonso, I thought he did a solid job with cinematography as well. The film definitely it has this really stylish look and feel to it. It definitely looks and feels like a 90s movie, but in a good way. With the way that he lights certain sequences, the way that certain scenes are shot. And I give him even more credit because he had to deal with a lot of crazy shit on the set, which I'll get into near the end of this review. It's edited by, looks like 5 different people. I don't know why this needed 5 editors. They did fine, but it's not like the editing is like one of the best things about the movie. It's there. And it was released by MGM, and it has a runtime about 100 minutes. I think it goes by a quick pace. I honestly didn't find this to be boring at all. It goes by pretty quick. Could have used some more action. Could have used some more scenes of the Meteor Man. But overall, though, I still feel it's a fast-paced, fun movie. And yeah, it had a $30 million budget, and it only made $8 million. It was a bomb. It was a bomb in the box office. Critics were mixed on it, so it didn't do spectacularly well critically, and it really didn't do that well in the box office. So it's a movie that flew by like a meteor, and then was not really heard from again until later when it started to get its cult following on home video. I don't, maybe it was the wrong time. I know Jurassic Park was, I don't know if it was released around the same time or not, but this was released in August, and maybe it was just a hard sell. Maybe audiences as a whole were not ready for a black superhero. Maybe they weren't ready to accept that yet. which is really too bad. But I mean, if you look at the box office, maybe that really is the case. It made 8 million, which is the same amount of money that Blank Man made in the box office, which came out a year later, and it also had a black superhero. But the difference between Blank Man and the Meteor Man is Blank Man had a lower budget and Meteor Man had a big budget. So it was a pretty big budget, and that made it a pretty big failure. I don't think the film is a failure, but it definitely did fail when it comes to its box office results. And that hurts even more because this movie had a sizable advertising campaign behind it. Not only did you have the TV spots and the trailers and stuff like that, but you had merchandise, you had a novelization, which I have somewhere. You had a bendy toy. Because, yeah, in the 90s, for some reason, they had these bendy toys. Well, we don't have action figures. No action figures. Bendy toys. And they call them action figures, but they're really just bendy toys. They're not really action figures. They did that for the Rocketeer, and they did one of them for the Meteor Man. And what's ironic about this is there's something on the bottom of the bendy toy, and it says, the superhero of the 90s. I'm like, yeah, the Meteor Man is not the superhero of the 90s. Like, that's a total lie. Like, that was an ambitious statement. It definitely did not live up to that. And it doesn't stop there, though, because Marvel Comics actually did an adaptation of the screenplay, but it also did a limited run of Meteor Man comics. They cut out the and just called it Meteor Man, and it was a 6-issue run that took place after the events of Meteor Man. So it is essentially a sequel to Meteor Man. And in one of the issues, Meteor Man teams up with Spider-Man, which I think is very interesting. But at the same time, it's not surprising because in the 90s, Spider-Man was Marvel's whore. Like, they whored him out to anything and everywhere. Like, he was in Ren and Stimpy comics. He had a cameo in Ren and Stimpy comics. So it wasn't that surprising. But it was really cool to see Meteor Man team up with Thrasher, though. That was nice to see. You had two black heroes teaming up with each other. So that was a nice moment. They missed the opportunity to have Meteor Man and Black Panther in a comic together. But because there was a spin-off series, Meteor Man is technically a part of the Marvel Universe. And that means that Meteor Man is in the same universe as Black Panther, which is definitely intriguing. I've read the comics, and sad to say though, they're pretty shitty. They're pretty sucky. This is back in the time in the 90s when the art was super inspired by Rob Liefeld. Everybody looks like they're jacked up on steroids. Everybody's like freakishly huge, and the writing was subpar. And yeah, it was one of those like, it really was not that great. It was a pretty poor run, and I can see why it's forgotten about, and I can see why it didn't really last any longer than 6 issues. But it's still an interesting bit of trivia. Now, before I get into more trivia, I want to mention a few more things about the Meteor Man. The score is great by Cliff Eidelmann, but I also like the soundtrack. It's got its fair share of fun songs, especially Ain't Nobody Bad Like Meteor Man by Big Hat Ray Ray, which plays at the end credits, and the Michael Jackson song that plays during the opening credits, Can't Let Her Get Away. So I thought that was pretty cool to hear a Michael Jackson tune in the Meteor Man. And I also like the opening titles. They have it's interesting. Like, the opening titles are very cinematic and super heroic, and something straight out of like Superman the movie. But then, like, the rest of the credits are as generic as possible, and then you have Michael Jackson music in the background. And I also want to mention the sequence when the meteor ends up hitting Jefferson in an alley, and that's when he first gets his powers, and it absorbs into his body. That is horrifying. And I've seen some people comment on that, and they're like, "Dad, that used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid," and I could see why. Like, this is rated PG, but man, that meteor scene is brutal. The meteor hits him and it slowly absorbs into his body while it's burning him, and he's all like singed and burned and screaming in pain. It's pretty terrifying. It's a very horrifying sequence, and it's a really well done effect by ILM. And they did that with a combination of different things, with digital and practical effects. And one other thing I definitely want to mention that I cannot not mention when it comes to Meteor Man, the Golden Lords themselves. I mean, the look the Golden Lords have, their outfits, their blonde hair, the fact that Simon Kane has like 2 tigers as pets. It's over the top, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, but it's awesome. It's oh so awesome. I really do like the Golden Lords, and I like the fact that there's not only just the adult Golden Lords in the gang, there's the junior Golden Lords who have like lunch boxes full of stolen money, you know, and they team up and try to, you know, wreak some havoc. And then you also have like the teenage, you know, the young Golden Lords who are like teenagers. And I like how there's like these different levels of Golden Lords. Yeah, the Golden Lords are definitely golden. And one other thing I want to mention about the film is it's marketed as a comedy, and it's not really that funny. It's not really much of a comedy. If you're looking at this as a comedy, I can see why you'd be disappointed, because it's not really that funny. There's some funny moments, and some funny scenes, and some nice chuckle-worthy moments in the movie, but honestly, it's played straight a lot of the times, even though it has its tongue in its left cheek. It's like a combination of, okay, when it needs to be serious, it's serious, but when it needs to be over the top, it's over the top. And somehow it manages to work those things out pretty well, despite the fact that those are two things that should not work. You know, opposites attract in this film's case. But yeah, that's one thing I definitely think they could have done more with, is the comedy. It could have been funnier. But then again, I like the fact that it tends to take things a little more serious, especially with the gang violence, and especially with the more harder, serious aspects of the film's plot. But I definitely had to mention that, because that's one thing about the script that I didn't mention that I really wanted to mention, because that was one of the problems I had with the movie. It's a comedy, but it's not really full of that many laugh out loud moments, and it could have been funnier, especially from Robert Townsend. But then again, I still like the film for what it is, and there's really not a lot that I would really change about the Meteor Man. I still think it's a really, really solid, spectacular at times film, just the way that it is. Now we get to the trivia and the behind the scenes stuff. Now, apparently Robert Townsend named Jefferson Reed after one of his childhood heroes, his favorite teacher. Well, I think that's really cool. That's really nice that he decided to get inspiration from the teacher that taught him when he was a kid. The movie is also rumored to have gone through many rewrites and changes while in production. Definitely looks like it, especially in the film's climax, resulting in many plot holes, including the exact abilities of Meteor Man, as well as subplots involving Jeff and his personal life. Yeah, the stuff with his girlfriend or his ex, and so on. Apparently Chris Tucker has a cameo in this. He is uncredited, but he's the voice of the MC in the mall when Eddie Griffin's character Michael pretends to be Meteor Man. Many scenes appeared in the script and could have been filmed, but they did not appear in the final film. These scenes include Simon asking Meteor Man to join him while they're both trying to get the meteor, with Meteor Man saying never. A scene where Jeff, losing his powers, attempts to save a cat but can't fly. When he finally gets off the ground, he catches the cat but falls. This is witnessed by Squirrel and Dre, who are about to tell this information to the Golden Lords, but is then stopped by Jeff. Also a scene where Jeff gets over his fear of heights, and a subplot involving Jeff's relationship with his ex Stacy is missing. I think these might be elements that are in the novelization, but I have not read the novelization in a while. Now, also, the original ending of the film was, it definitely felt like it was more thought through. It definitely felt like it was less rushed and there was more to it. The original ending had a more confident Jeff standing up for himself and his community and using his role as a teacher to better everyone's life. He then gets approached by Michael, who tells him that an even bigger piece of the meteor that hit him was found in Arizona. The two then agree to buy plane tickets so that Jeff can get his powers back and once again become the Meteor Man. This is then followed by Michael trying to talk him into letting him get some superpower from the meteor so he can be his sidekick. It then ends with Michael throwing out names to him, such as Comet Boy, Chocolate Thunder, and Flying Wonder. So, that definitely sounds like an ending that I really do feel could have worked, and honestly might have worked even better, because the way things happen in the ending of this, the Crips and the Bloods team up, the drug lords and all those guys are in the same place at the same time, the cops show up immediately and arrest everybody. It's like everything's all solved and there's no need for the Meteor Man. It's like everything just is tied up in a bow way too prettily. And I want to mention how truly passionate and ready and willing Robert Townsend was when it comes to this movie. I've heard people say that films like this are a throwaway. Black Panther, for instance, the latest Marvel blockbuster. Well, that's a black superhero film that had a lot of care put into it and time was put into it. And Meteor Man was just a throwaway movie. That is not the case at all, because cinematographer John Alonzo, he mentions that Robert Townsend really put 110%, if not even more than that, into this movie. Robert Townsend, he had worked with a sketch artist to prepare elaborate storyboards compiled in a loose-leaf notebook. Alonzo says he spent hours with Townsend looking through those drawings one at a time. Townsend also prepared an 80-page synopsis of the script that he called the Bible. It described every important detail, including colors, props, and wardrobe, scene by scene. Townsend put his heart and soul into the Meteor Man, and it shows. It really does. Now, the Meteor Man had effects that were done by ILM, and some of those effects, a lot of the sequences that dealt with flying, were actually done with Photoshop. Photoshop has been around a long time, folks. It isn't just a new thing. They were created with a desktop computer and Photoshop software, developed in part by an ILM employee. So apparently there's a connection between Photoshop and Industrial Light and Magic. Wow. Industrial Light and Magic really is synonymous with the cutting edge, and then some. In all, there are 117 different visual effects shots in the Meteor Man, including 3D computer graphics, digital wire removal, and both digital and optical compositing of foreground and background picture elements. Doesn't seem like much, but back then, that was quite a few effect shots, especially for a comedy. The production of the Meteor Man began in Los Angeles. The company was shooting at a downtown hotel when the 1992 summer riots altered plans. Townsend and producer Laretha Jones briefly considered moving the film to Washington, D.C., and even filmed some key scenes there before settling on Baltimore, where the film was completed almost entirely at practical locations. Among the few sets that were used were a warehouse and a basement, and these were primarily used for protection when it rained, which was often. And I like that. I like that they didn't really shoot this on a soundstage. They shot it, for the most part, on actual locations. With some help from municipal authorities, Robert Townsend commandeered a full city block, plus some parts of adjoining streets for exterior scenes. He also had every room of a 4-story brownstone building at his disposal, and he put all of the residents on the payroll as extras. The house, built 60 to 70 years ago, had small rooms and narrow hallways, and in some ways it was a crew's nightmare. Even the smallest dolly had to be turned sideways and hauled up the stairs by hand. And it gets worse. It gets even crazier, folks. This is what I was talking about when it comes to how Alonzo and company had to deal with a lot of crazy shit on the set. Because occasionally the crew wondered if the convincing reality of the location was worth it, especially the day that they found a dead body in a location apartment. Yes, they found a dead body. They found a body. And they kept on shooting. Now, that is what I call perseverance. And it gets even more crazy. Gets even more nuts. Many nights they could hear the distinctive crack of an Uzi firing somewhere in the vicinity. They would fire in the air so you knew that at any moment a bullet could fall out of the sky and hit you in the head, says cinematographer Alonzo. Our security people told us to stay off the crane at night because we would be too good of a target. People were risking their lives shooting the Meteor Man. Yeah, it's true. Ain't nobody bad like the Meteor Man. I mean, wow. When I first heard that, I was stunned. I gotta give all the kudos in the world for the cast and crew for this film because they risked their lives shooting this movie. I mean, wow, that is really really crazy. And on that note, I think that's all I really wanted to say when it comes to the behind the scenes and the trivia. I really wanted to mention that story because I thought that was really cool and crazy, and that's the reason why I love looking at trivia and doing stuff like that. And I really don't know what else to say about the Meteor Man, other than if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars, because yeah, I'm rating movies again. I'd give it 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this film. I actually liked it more than the Black Panther. Sue me. It really did speak to me and my personal tastes. I liked it. I thought it was charming. I thought it was irresistibly charming and entertaining and fun. And I do recommend it. If you haven't seen it, check it out sometime. Maybe it won't be your cup of tea, but I definitely do recommend people give this one a look. Because I do feel that it's a movie that isn't a total bomb. That it's one of those films that it is a hit, at least to me. It is a hit. It does hit. It does hit at the right moments. And yes, it could be better in some ways, but it could be a lot worse. And I don't think it's a cheesy, corny pile of crap like other people say it is. What people call cheesy, I call charming, and I call my cup of tea. But anyway, thank you for watching this long retrospective / review of the Meteor Man. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.